Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Gilliland, and I'm one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. We are here to discuss episode 3 of the Bad Batch replacements, not the replacements. We've got to be very clear about what this is named. With me are good friends who are colleagues, and we go on many adventures together, all virtual for the last 14 months, and that is Steve Chu and Thomas Harper. Gentlemen, how are you each doing tonight?
Go ahead, Steve. You take the lead. We're deferring. I'm great. I'm great to be talking about this very lighthearted episode that, had no heavy issues whatsoever. Just a big ball of
walk in the park. Right, walk in the park. This is lighthearted family fun. And we have my little guy Brandon here, who was very impressed with the episode as well. Do you like the Bad Batch?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You got to speak up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you like it?
I don't know. I just like Clone Wars a lot.
That's a good answer. That's a very good answer.
That's dependable. Like, there's nothing. I just do. Period.
That's the kind of quote that is on the DVD box when you get it that helps sell it.
Right there. Yeah.
Brandon, I heard you had a really good observation about the name of this episode.
Yeah. Replacements. It works in a bunch of ways because they have to replace the part, and the Bad Batch gets replaced with that elite squad.
Right.
I guess it's just another elite squad, but
a lot of things getting replaced, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
The clone army is getting replaced also.
By stormtroopers.
Right. And Crosshairs also is getting replaced. By Omega. Yeah.
I think Dave Filoni would give you a big high five if we were in person right now. That's really great. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done. He does understand from a certain point of view. So
he's our replacement, Josh. So it's going to be
our replacement. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's going to be the Steve and Brandon show from here on out.
When our kids all get older, they'll all replace us. So.
Yeah. Well, that's contingency planning. It'd be very bad if there wasn't someone to carry the mantle.
True.
Because I don't want to be the last Jedi. Come on.
The last legal geek, right?
Yeah. Nope. We want it to continue. It must go on. So. And our books are fun to read, so there's that as well. So we can take a deep dive. So this is a target-rich episode of some very big legal issues that focus more on Crosshairs. There are other issues that can come up with Clone Force 99 now on the run with what happens to them. But our main legal issues come with Crosshairs. So we get the big issue of the Empire is having the Kaminoans experiment on him to ramp up the influence of the inhibitor chip to change his behavior. There's a big issue of if there's even medical consent or if he's just being a good soldier following orders. Tom, as the JAG officer, if you found out that there was a science division doing this, what would your reaction be?
Well, my non-disclosure agreement would probably prevent me from talking. I'm kidding. So I have an interesting observation from the way that scene unfolded that I think plays into my analysis here. When he sits up out of the machine, he's told that his vital statistics are up to snuff. They don't tell him anything about messing with a chip. It's unclear whether he even understands that he has an inhibitor chip, what its function is, any of that. And so the wool has been pulled over his eyes, and you can presume from the Clone Wars and other material that he's just in line with the rest of the clones like that. And so he has no consent in this process. He's told to show up for a medical appointment. He probably presumes it's something basic, and something a little more sinister is being done. And so you don't give blanket. I guess real world analogy is that when you join, even though you give up a number of your rights to serve in uniform, you don't give up all of them, and that includes your right to consent or decline certain medical procedures. The Army has, and I would say the entire military has certain duty standards, certain health standards that you have to meet. But if your knee is injured and you don't want to get the surgery to fix your knee, you might not be able to serve anymore. They might boot you out because of that ailment, but they're not going to twist your arm and force you to go under the knife. And I think the most relevant example today is, there's an ongoing debate about whether military members can be forced to take the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine. And that's something that the government is working through its paces right now. So in the case of Crosshair, it's clear that he hasn't consented to being a mindless robot. He's just been activated that way. And I think it comes down to a question of how lawfully he's treated, because he's chattel as far as the Kaminoans are considered. He's property. He's a thing. He's not a living thing, except insofar as he's a soldier, and that's it. And you hear that in Lama Su's comments about, well, they're at the end of the episode, they're Kaminoan property, and we only need one of them. So it's clear how they see them, and from that aspect, the lens that they see these clones through, their property, therefore we can do whatever we need to. I think they equate that sort of medical treatment to like popping the hood on a car and doing maintenance like you would on a company car or something like that, which is kind of a bizarre and twisted way to deal with a human being.
The 13th Amendment, that would not play well. They're people. And the Fives arc in the Clone Wars from, was it season 6? Dealt with their humanity. And they just civil rights issues of, their property. We fought a civil war over that. And we really don't like that. So that there's that. Then we get the mission. So Tarkin wants them to go, finish the mission that Clone Force 99 refused to do because Hunter said, we're not killing civilians. We're not shooting grandmas. We're not shooting little kids, which as a civilian, I really want our military thinking that way. I want them to go like, time out. This is nope. This was not what was on the brochure. This was not the mission briefing. We're not killing grandma. So I don't know why they have the fascination with every planet needs to sound like Alderaan, but it does in this case. And that's just weird. I don't know if either of you felt that way as well.
It's just it's the trip up trivia nerds like me. Yeah, that's all it is.
Is it Dantooine? Okay, why is everything
right?
Why are all the
Tatooine, Dantooine.
Yeah, why are all the names rhyming and have a ween or a Ron on them? Can we? I mean, sure, they're Scarif, but still, it'd be nice to have a little more name diversity so we don't get tripped up with how many A's are in that.
I don't want to do galactic geography, I'll tell you that much.
No, thank you. And I was looking online to figure out the spelling of it, and none of the articles had it yet. So
I think we might have lost Josh there. Interestingly, the capital of Onderon, which I think was named before any of the real world event. Oh, there he is.
Okay.
Hey.
No problem. I thought like, wait, everyone's starting to spin. So it must be my connection that just had a hiccup.
Lucasfilm detected that you were talking about planet name.
Yeah, you're throwing shade on them. So
sent a little data spike your way.
Yeah. uh, finish him. Yeah. That said, they go. And Tom, I think, again, let's lean into the JAG side of it, and then Steve and I can jump in. We see there's soldiers and there's refugees, and a firefight starts. You've done Law of War. You've advised people on missions. When did that go from lawful engagement to war crime, in your opinion?
The moment Tarkin gave them the order to go back in, because I think there was some amount of plausible deniability based on whatever the intel that the Empire had when the Bad Batch was originally sent out. They were sent out to wipe out Saw's camp. You could infer that the only intel they had was it's a camp of combatants, Saw and a bunch of other fighters. Obviously, when they get there, the reality on the ground is very different. It's a mixed bag of civilians and whatnot. And so they refuse the mission and come back. Well, now the Empire, now Tarkin has that intel that there is no question that there are civilians involved. And you notice there's no change in the order. It's just finish the mission. It's not go in and kind of surgically take out the people that we can lawfully target here. It's kill everybody. And Tarkin is quite frankly perturbed that they didn't just use that lack of discretion to begin with. And that's why you have Crosshair involved leading this one. And so I think from the moment the order is issued, it's an illegal order because now there is no doubt. That doubt's been removed. They've been sent in. The non-clones, these other troopers obviously don't know that because they don't understand there's civilians there until they physically come up on the camp. But the order was illegal from ground zero.
But to play devil's advocate for a moment, to quote Crosshair, good soldiers follow orders, right, Thomas?
Yeah. Thank you, Lieutenant Kelly. Yeah, that's let's get into was it Major Medina and William Calley, and I don't remember the general, but
yeah,
I mean, like this is a really good comparison to My Lai.
And I think that's Steve. That's a fair comparison. I think and a fair point to make through the lens of the non-clones, because out of all of those folks executing the mission, the only one who steps off or flies off knowing that they're likely going to be targeting civilians or that's part of their mission is Crosshair. And he doesn't divulge anything until they're in the. I think that's intentional. They want to see part of this test is a loyalty test to see how can these conscriptees, can these enlistees get the job done? Because in Tarkin's mind, he doesn't need. I mean, the question of getting enough bodies to militarily control the galaxy is problem one. Problem two is having a loyal enough army that's willing to do whatever it is that you tell them to do. And that includes, at least in Tarkin's mind, just ignoring basic principles of Law of War. So for the other four soldiers, you get into the baseline, which is that an order once issued is presumed legal, unless otherwise. And so in those soldiers' minds, the order wipe out this camp. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They should follow that order, and they're prepared to right up until it's clear that it's illegal.
So if we change the facts a little bit, let's say they get there are no more women and children. They've left the camp. All that's left are soldiers. Is the order illegal at that point? No,
it's not illegal at that point. No, I mean, because this is the great thing that Star Wars does to make things a little more clear cut. Think about that scene where they come up on the camp, or when they show the camp, and think about the difference in appearance between the civilians and non-civilians. You can tell immediately who the soldiers are. They're wearing distinctive emblems. They're openly carrying arms. They've got loose uniforms on. I mean, they're not wearing just total civilian clothes. So that's exactly what international law sort of calls for when you talk about the distinguishing between civilians and combatants. So they're not trying to, pretend to be civilians and kind of steal or ape off of that protected status. But at the same time, that's got to be observed on the other side when you're targeting as well.
Yeah, this is, I think there's a couple lines of analysis, because I really do, I did not expect that you would say the order was illegal from the get-go, because Tarkin knew that they're civilians and he knew that he was issuing a kill order. So I'm glad you feel that way. And
Tarkin makes it so easy. There's no gray area with Tarkin. He's just like bad to the core.
We have to be careful. This comes up. We see this. There are particular defenses that apply to the military chain of command, and specifically soldiers who are injured in the line of duty or service connected. They typically cannot question the orders of their superiors, and they can't sue, for example, the military for injuries that they suffer while quote unquote on the job. And the reason for that is largely policy driven, because courts and just in general, the legislature, we do not want soldiers questioning orders, because that would result in a breakdown in the military chain of command. So, certainly in a case as clear cut as this one, gunning down civilians and children, I think most people would agree that wherever the line is, it has been crossed at that point. But we have to remember that on the other side, there is this competing interest that is very valid. Here it's an easy call because we have a crazy despotic commander like Tarkin, and we're killing innocents. But there's going to be a lot of gray area too, and what do you do at that point? Maybe we'll see some of those situations later in the season.
And you see that play out very often in real life. And here, think about the mindset of the three soldiers that watched there, and I don't know that they named any of the four yet, but the leader, the sort of de facto leader of the four non-clones, makes a stand. He tells Crosshair to his face, "We're not doing this. I love the line, ignore the clone."
Yes.
And he just turns and just decides to walk away. Like, I'm taking charge now. We didn't sign up to be executioners. And I was like, this is a great moment. And then Crosshair draws down on him and shoots him right in the chest. And the other three, the animation is so perfect because it just captures, even though they've got helmets on, exactly what's going through their mind. And so when I put my defense hat on, and that's the real world job that I do in the military, for those that don't know me, but I do criminal defense in the Army. And if I'm defending any of those three in court, there is no defense under the UCMJ of, hey, he outranked me and I just had to follow the order. The military expects that if there's an illegal order, morals will come into play and you will not follow it. However, that's easier said than done a lot of times in practice, and that doesn't excuse. So while that doesn't operate as a legal defense that could get you acquitted, it's a major mitigating or extenuating circumstance that I would absolutely bring into play if any of these three were on trial and I was defending them, because this isn't a situation where they fail to make a moral call and that's it in a vacuum. They watch a friend of theirs, a brother in arms, get gunned down in cold blood, and the not even telegraph message, but the clear message from Crosshair, their superior, is, "You're next if you refuse." So when given the choice between executing this horrendous legal order and dying by execution, they make, in their minds, the least of two bad options.
Actually, there was a third that they didn't do, and that's shoot Crosshairs.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
If you think you're quicker than him.
Yeah, well, three. So he can't get you all at once, because here's my 2 cents on it. The necessity defense of, we had to murder the civilians with a flamethrower and blasters, was out of fear that Crosshairs would shoot us like he shot Elite Officer 1. Well, no, like you don't get to do that. There isn't, you can't kill someone out of necessity. It's one thing if it's self-defense, but you can't kill a civilian. You can shoot the guy who's threatening to kill you, but you can't go, the only way to keep Crosshairs from killing me was for me to murder a kid and his mom. That's indefensible. So if they wanted self-defense of we had to shoot Crosshairs because he wanted us to murder children, okay, like you can sell that to a jury, and you couldn't sell it to Tarkin because, again, Doctrine of Fear guy, like he's fine with shooting subordinates in order to achieve an objective.
I would think less, because I agree with you. I don't think that they would get that instruction. I don't think they would meet the bar to get a jury instruction on necessity. But I do think, I would be going to try to nullify jury votes. If it's a jury of peers, if it's other, in this case, conscriptees or something that sort of the military style jury that we have in the real world, I'd be trying to get them on board to say, well, I don't like at all what they did, but I can understand and empathize. And maybe you don't avoid a conviction, but maybe you avoid the sledgehammer coming down at sentencing. And you see that quite frequently. I mean, in some of the awful cases from Iraq and Afghanistan where soldiers have stood trial for crimes committed, quite frequently you will see the younger soldiers that were a part of that, or the lower ranking soldiers, not mount a successful defense, but they'll try to avoid the worst of it by using that sort of line of thinking. And the one that jumps to mind is Clint Lawrence, the lieutenant who was pardoned by the previous administration for killing some Afghan civilians. The younger soldiers, most of whom, a lot of whom in his squad participated, but they were under his orders as their commanding officer at the time, didn't exonerate them. Some of them did time right alongside him, but I think it played a part in their role, because you've got, in that case, a big age disparity, a huge rank disparity, and here you have some of that same stuff in play. So I don't think it gets any of them out of it, but I think it can help them at trial.
You're playing the big picture there, playing for sentencing rather than for acquittal.
Well, yeah. And when you roast somebody with a flamethrower, there's you don't have too many cards that you can play, and that's a whole set. The use of that weapon is a whole separate issue in and of itself.
Yeah.
Well, that's used for terror, like in a world with blasters. Now, Grant, we've seen flamethrowers before. That we've seen them in Mandalorian. We've seen them in Force Awakens. It's not the first time that we've seen flamethrowers, but they're a terror weapon. And the Empire's big on scaring the hell out of people. Like, we will burn you. We'll burn down your house. And the fact that you have somebody using a flamethrower at point blank range, and like at that point, the blasters are just mercy killings to end the suffering. So, like, this is, for a children's program, this is beyond horrific. And I
said, a light, fun episode.
I applaud Lucasfilm for going there, because just like with the Fives arc, that was a deep discussion of why slavery is bad and what it means to be human. And they dealt with those weighty topics for 7-year-olds. And this is a huge moral issue that is a great way for young people to get introduced to them and hopefully discuss it with their parents of, this is bad and we don't want this.
Yeah. Well, the flamethrower is a good. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say that I think the episode handled it well, just from a cinematography. I was watching this with our boys, and I was kind of gritting my teeth a little bit. They're getting to the age where they can watch some of these items and be okay. But our younger one still gets a little scared. And so you can see the execution coming up, and it cut away, and you just hear the sounds. And there's a school of filmmaking that believes that can actually be even scarier than than watching it. Chris Carter, the X-Files guy, always said that the monster you don't see is scarier than the one that you do see. So the horror you do not see often can be scarier than what you in fact do see. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, we have some heavy themes, as you guys have been saying. I thought it was fascinating that we get a lot of character exposition, relatively speaking, for this one human, soldier who is objecting to the orders. I don't know if he gets named, but we learn about his character quite a bit, despite only seeing him, only knowing him for a few minutes. We know that he wasn't, because he now has food and money and a purpose, and with some things that he never had under the Republic. So okay, he's a disgruntled person. The system didn't work for him. You can agree or disagree, but at least you could understand this is why he's kind of okay with the Empire thus far, anyways. We also see that he's very discriminating towards the clones, and he looks down on them. So we have an extra reason to dislike this guy, because up until now, at least, we like clones. We've been cheering for them during the wars. So when we meet this guy who's just very bigoted, you're thinking, okay, who's the jerk? I don't really like him. And yet it's the jerk who takes the principled stand and says, I didn't sign up for this. We're not executioners. And you're thinking, that's right. Okay, there's some principles. There's a line they won't cross. And this is something that Tarkin and the Empire will continue to run into. The problem with having conscripts versus clones, problem in air quotes, I suppose, is that you've got soldiers that may think for themselves. And as we've been discussing thus far, if you are a dictatorial commander, that may be a bad thing, to have soldiers that may think for themselves. And he's the one that objects, and he makes the stand, and he dies for it. So I thought that was really interesting. Here's a guy who we already have reason to hate, the one who makes the moral stand. So now suddenly you're cheering for him in that moment. And of course, what's going to happen. The episode really can't go very many directions from there. Crosshair has to take him down and scare the rest into compliance. So very interesting story exposition choices, I thought. What did you guys think?
It's a missed sales point for the Kaminoans, because it's like they're focused on creating a superior clone, like presumably in skills and technique and enhanced abilities. All they really need to do is say, look, when we sold these things to the Jedi Order, the whole deal was that they would unquestioningly follow orders. We tampered with the genetic code to make them completely docile and less independent, so you can send them to do whatever it is you want. Wipe out the whole Jedi Order? Good. Fight your war across the galaxy and never question, well, at least except in a few cases, never question their station in life? All good. You don't get that with conscriptees. So
exactly.
Anyhow, that they need a sales department there in Kamino.
This raises a big issue, because the way that they use the word conscript shows that the Admiral, was it Reinhardt or
Ransard?
He doesn't.
Or Rampart.
He doesn't know what the word conscript means, because that means a draftee, and a volunteer military is better. And we have historical evidence of that. There's times when you need a draft if you need a whole bunch of people to go fight the Nazis, because we're going to need a giant army and navy to do so. On the flip side, like we learned in the Vietnam era, that was bad. So McNamara's Project 100,000 was part of the nightmare that gave us My Lai, by laxing standards to let people in. So we were getting people who didn't think clearly, and were willing to go, sure, I'll go shoot the civilians because I was told to. So there is that factor. I do want to say that with spunky American character, there's plenty of evidence of the loudmouth jerk being the one with the most morals to say no to something. There's highly recommend the book The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors by James Horn Fisher. which was, the largest surface warfare fleet ever put together, was by Imperial Japan, and they part of Leyte Gulf. So this is Battle of Samar, and this massive fleet cruises up on 3 destroyers, 1 destroyer escort, and like 2 or 3 baby aircraft carriers the planes are just armed with depth charges because they're on submarine patrol at the moment.
Mm.
And one of the pilots and they fight like hell, but one of the pilots was from Louisiana. He landed at the Army airfield that all the Navy was defending against this monster coming at them. And the Army guys refused to fill up his plane. And saying like,
Sounds about right.
sorry, this is an Army base. We don't have time to do that.
Wow. Yeah.
This ain't your
Yeah.
fuel.
Yeah.
So the pilot drew his sidearm and got his plane filled up at that point, and other words were exchanged. And it's like, rock on. There was a guy going, what's wrong with you? And I don't normally approve of that, but in this case, it worked. And he went on to go help fight like hell to save all those guys on the beach, because it would have been a massive loss of life if that fleet had just bombarded Samar, including the Yamamoto. So again, 18-inch shells falling. So again, it's nice having that spunky guy that goes like, screw you, this is wrong, and we're getting it done, even if I have to pull a gun on you to do it. So
Right.
that's the type of guy I would enjoy defending. So
I think that's a great point, Josh. You kind of need the journal, because they have a strong enough personality that they'll tell you what they think, even if what they think may be something you disagree with most of the time, but they often end up being the one that can take that moral stand. I want to point out that this discussion, there are so many layers to this, and fundamentally what we're hitting on, and we've touched on this issue in the past too, is clone rights. What rights do these clones have? Are they in fact individuals? Are they people? Or are they property? Are they chattel, as was, in the episode itself? And that's been explored very well by Dave Filoni and his group before, certainly with the Defector, who made an appearance in the prior episode. I thought fantastic, that we're getting these old characters back. But what happens when, they're clearly not just robots, as much as we may want to think that, and as some of them think that. They're not just robots when some of them want to go off and just live a peaceful life, but at the same time, they're not quite human, and because they do have a chip and their behavior can be controlled to some degree. And we see that with Crosshair. He seems to have some doubt put into the machine, and they amplify his chip, and then now it appears at least to have eliminated his doubt, and he's just hardcore, good soldiers follow orders. So, what are they individuals? And I think they were certainly created to be almost mindless soldiers, to kind of cross every line that was needed to win. But we've now ended up in a place where it hasn't worked out that way. We've got some great examples: Echo, Fives, Rex, the Farmer. What happens when your creation wants? It's a fascinating sci-fi concept, I think.
Well,
The irony of, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just add that, to quote Yoda from the first episode of the Clone Wars, the Force flows through all living things, and they're living things too, and life matters. So the fact that we have many clones that developed a conscience, who could say this is fundamentally wrong, or I met a nice Twi'lek girl and want to go, be a farmer with her. Cool. Like, that's good for him. So I, again, never underestimate humanity or life, since we're dealing in a universe that has a great variety of it. Tom?
The irony of all of it is, I go back to episode 1, and you have Padme and that when they're visiting with Anakin and Shmi, and she's just astounded that slavery still exists in the galaxy. That this concept that's so repulsive at the core of the galaxy on Coruscant still happens. And Shmi is like, "Well, the Republic's anti-slavery laws. The Republic doesn't exist out here," and yet within 10 years of that, as soon as the moment arises, how quickly the Republic, with Palpatine pulling the strings, obviously, but how quickly they just dive right off of that cliff. And all of a sudden, questions of slavery and that stuff, those are convenient peacetime questions. And I love, it's a really brief scene, but in Attack of the Clones, when Obi-Wan calls back to Coruscant and reports that the separatists have amassed a big army, and it looks like they're prepping for war. There's this scene in Palpatine's office where one of the characters says, the debate's over. We need that clone army now. And it's like immediate. And then they go right into this discussion of granting emergency powers, not because there's some sort of debate, but because the Senate could not act quickly enough to get this clone army approved. I mean, it's just, it happens in a blink of an eye that sort of moral grounding just completely gets cut off in the face of, a larger perceived need. All the while Palpatine's just hook, line, and sinker. I got all of you.
Well,
there's historical analogs for that, for better or for worse, we've seen that come up.
I mean, we've always, no, you're quite right. There's, again, I'm a Gen Xer and I do have some problems with the prequels. I will say it was a bold story told poorly. That said, we have Palpatine pulling major strings to soften up the society to be ready for a dictator, for them to abandon democracy and to go like, let's just get a big army because that's disposable. So we're going to get disposable people to fight our war because we've had a lax foreign policy and we weren't prepared. Therefore, to go fight the other disposable army that's made up of droids. I mean, this gets into, there's nature of foreign policy at that point. For example, I really don't like drones in combat because the more we do to make it easier to fight a war, the more likely we're going to get into one. So that's just a moral issue of I don't like them. And the fact that the Navy's rolling out unmanned surface vehicles now, it's like, I hate to say this, but having our own people who can make decisions in the field, so it's not AI deciding to start a nuclear war, is the world I prefer living in because it won't turn into radioactive slag. And here we have, two armies that are disposable because there's no investment from the civilian population for their own defense. So when you have a volunteer military with people who make the professional life choice that I'm going to defend my country, it's generally better than conscripts or AI that decides to fire a missile. So,
Josh, we've learned the lessons from various other sci-fi properties, but don't forget that after Skynet took over, the stealth bombers flew 100% success rate with 0 casualties. They were very successful. And then also in Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, when the world is on the brink of nuclear war, and some astronauts and soldiers are writing like, I think it may happen, and they're all giving up hope. And the last thing they say is, our last hope is that the decision to destroy the world will have to be made by a human. And that's why we still have hope. And actually that ends up being important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it would have, the Cuban Missile Crisis is a wonderful example of how AI could annihilate the planet. Because there were 3 Soviet submarines, and this is covered in detail in the book Red November, that all had Crimson Tide type moments with people shouting about, do we fire our nuclear torpedo, knowing that we're in the kill zone of our own weapon. And one of them had one, captain said, no, we're not doing this. And another captain, they had a change of command. So the prior captain was still on board, and he was supposed to get off the boat in Cuba. And screaming match in the control room, and the prior captain took over. And that's why it didn't die in 1963. So I much rather have people at the helm. So when you look at this
just not Crosshair.
Yeah, just not Crosshair.
Yeah, right.
Because you want moral people who do the analysis. Now, let's pivot back to Crosshair on how do we defend him? Like if we are defense counsel and he comes in and the chip's been turned off and he's freaked out that I killed civilians, I shot our own guys, and I ordered civilians to be killed. How do we defend him? And is it any different than defending the people who carried out his orders? So, Tom, as the defense guy, do you want to walk through the insanity defense for a enhanced inhibitor chip?
My mind's almost going to like an irresistible impulse type defense, or maybe a hybrid of the two, because for an insanity defense, you've got to have a severe mental disease or defect, and then linked to that, the ability, that defect or disease, inhibits your ability to appreciate the wrongfulness of your conduct or renders you unable to do it. And here, the inhibitor chip is sort of like an external, non-organic addition to the clones. It doesn't fit the bill the same way as like a psychosis would. Although I think you might argue that that's the end result, that it creates this haywire situation in the brain where they're compelled to follow the order. And so that's where my brain goes to this like irresistible impulse, that even if you can't qualify this external chip that's been installed in them as a disease or a defect, because it's not organic, they weren't born with that per se. I mean, it's not something that would have been there but for genetic manipulation. There's still nonetheless this psychological short-circuiting that compels Crosshair in this instance to follow orders. He has no other choice. He has no choice in the matter. So you're attacking the mens rea, or the mental aspect, that he did not form the mental intent on his own to commit those crimes. This was a byproduct of a chip installed that he had no say in and no knowledge of. And I think that'd be a powerful defense, although maybe I'm biased by my ears on one side of the aisle.
I would concur. I think Thomas, one word defense: choice.
Yeah,
he had no choice, and he was bred to not have choice by virtue of these control chips. So at no point could he form the decision-making process and weigh the pros and cons. He was almost a robot. I think that's probably the best, the most appealing defense. Now there may be multiple dominoes that flow if that succeeds and you establish some precedent, and it may deal a blow to individual rights, activists for the clones. But that strikes me as a very powerful defense. It's sort of like the Manchurian Candidate type of defense, or almost like brainwashing, or some kind of control. And Josh, I think I'm being influenced subconsciously by your background there. When I see Captain America's shield, I'm thinking of the Winter Soldier and Bucky, who was brainwashed into being one of the most deadly assassins for many years. And it was all against his will. He unquestionably, he didn't want to do these things, but he remembers them and he gets out of the fog eventually, and he tries to atone for those sins. Crosshairs and Bucky may not be too far apart in some ways.
I think they're similar because Bucky was getting ECT and put in and out of the freezer for 65 years, that would suck. And what are the effects and side effects from all of that torture that was happening? Crosshair is getting worked on as well, and his mind manipulated. So I do think that there is a good insanity defense, because he doesn't understand the wrongfulness of his actions because of the chip that's in his head. And I do think we can still argue for clone free will, because a chip was put in that impacted his ability to think, and he can't understand the wrongfulness of his actions because of the damn chip in his brain that is getting augmented and turned up to weaken his ability to think for himself. Also, when we get to the end and they're back in their barracks, the way that he looks, that it just made me wonder, is he still in there? Is there a subconscious, is he inside screaming, going like this?
That's a great point. That's a great, you get parallel moments. The clones, the Bad Batch, they say, okay, I'll admit it, I'll say it, I miss Crosshair. What do you think? And then Crosshair, when he re-enters their old barracks that was dedicated solely to the Bad Batch, but he's got the new elite squad with him, he pauses for like a moment. And in that moment, I feel like that could be some of that humanity there. Maybe. I don't know. But it was a nice moment.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether they're going to have to, because clearly they put him under again. This is now the second time we've seen him in that MRI type device. Is this going to be a constant cycle for him where whatever the chip's effects are and the degree of them, they have to maintain that sort of amp up, that they'll fade over time, and if they're not careful, he can revert?
And that would reinforce the idea of the brainwashing and the unwilling soldier, that if he gets far enough out and then he's able to think for himself, then maybe he could reconcile with the Bad Batch. That's very interesting. I wonder where the season will take us as far as that goes. But having one of their members, and I have to apologize. I've been saying crosshairs, not crosshair. And I think he's crosshair singular. But I've been saying plural because there is an Autobot Target Master from 1987 Transformers who's called Crosshairs, and I'm looking at his file card information and his technical schematics right now. It's confirming that that's his name. But that's why when I saw him, automatically my mind went to, oh yeah, I have that toy. Crosshair.
I love the fact you have a Transformers visual dictionary character guy just handy.
No, this is like original stuff, my friend.
I have more than that, but that's time for another discussion in terms of my level of fandom or nerdiness or whatever you want to call it.
The interesting thing what popped into my head is the interesting parallel you see some 30-ish years later when the First Order rises, because you see a little bit more of this in Resistance than anything. They have a literal conscript army, children pressed into service, but they're not clones. They don't have, in fact, in Force Awakens, you have that classic line between Kylo and Hux where he's like, perhaps the Supreme Leader should consider a clone army.
Right.
But in Resistance, you see that they are using brain manipulation techniques on their soldiers. In fact, in Force Awakens, you see Finn get sent for reconditioning, and you can only imagine what that is. And Hux defends the soldiers, their entire program, by saying that they're programmed from birth. And so you see that even decades later, there's an issue with, an interest in compliance of your foot soldiers in an army that's doing lots of illegal things, and you need a little bit of manipulation there to try to get them to not question the things that they're doing, because otherwise you get a lot of Finns running around, or Jannas for that matter.
Good callback. Very good call. I would also opine that the reason that we see stormtroopers by the time of the original trilogy, have no problem killing civilians, or Uncle Owen and Aunt Peru, is we now have nearly 2 decades of guys just getting shot for not doing something fast
Yeah.
enough. So there's probably, that's a societal norm at this point of like, no, I don't want to get, shot by
Yeah.
Tarkin.
And
You
it
know,
might be
that-
ingrained in training too. I mean, they
Yeah.
may train with no rules whatsoever, just get the mission done, whatever it takes, and that could be ingrained in them.
In high school I took a wonderful history class called War and Peace. I got into all Nuremberg and like the Zimbardo study and the Stanford Prison Experiment, and in why do people do horrible things. And one of the case studies after World War II was a German who was hawking infants into an incinerator, and he was asked, like, why did you do that? And his reaction was like, you would too. And which is just like horrifying to think about on so many levels, that like are the Imperials that we will see by A New Hope, like, is this the indoctrination and truly the doctrine of fear that is just a nonstop war crime against humanity, and people fearing for their lives constantly?
It's fascinating. We talked earlier in the episode about the moral lines, the moral compass of the Republic, and no slavery, and then yet within 10 years they start crossing that line very clearly. And I think we've seen in real world history, as well as in science fiction and various properties, we see that some of the more fascinating villains are those who start with good intentions. Obviously, I don't know that Palpatine fits in that corner, but these people who cross that line at some point, the ends justify the means is usually the rationale. What we see is that each successive time that they have to cross that line, it gets easier and easier, and the line gets pushed further and further. So there's a couple interesting points with regard to Crosshair. If he does have to undergo continual sort of treatment or brainwashing, whatever you want to call it, in order to keep him compliant, then he does become a more sympathetic character, and it's a little easier for the audience to cheer for him. And we have seen a lot of brainwashing stories and other science fiction properties. We mentioned Winter Soldier in Captain America. This was also a theme in the original Marvel G.I. Joe comics, because Cobra used the brainwave scanner by Dr. Venom, and that's how, at least later in the Larry Hama run, they kept some powerful agents like Storm Shadow under control in Cobra, and he was one of the most powerful Cobra agents through use of the brainwave scanner. Also, they used it on Baroness and Billy, but we see that at some points he was able to break free of the brainwashing and kind of come back. So it's similar to what we're talking about here. We see these brainwashing stories quite a bit, and then you end up cheering for the person who's fighting it, and because we want to believe that everyone can fight back and assert their own moral authority. Whether that will happen here or not, I guess time will tell. I wanted to offer one other observation, which is in watching the first episode, which was just awesome, I thought, with my kids. My older one finished playing Jedi Fallen Order this summer and absolutely loved it. And yeah, one of the best games I've ever seen. I just thought, wow, if this were a game when I was a kid, wow. So we just loved seeing the immediate aftermath of Order 66. That you see not just up until that point, which is what we had seen in the movies, but right afterwards, we see this address by the new emperor, and things are going to be different. I've been attacked. I'm a victim, so we need to clamp down and assert our authority. And the clones all start cheering. You're like, oh, okay, well, it's interesting how this happens, and you can feel for the safety of the Bad Batch that, okay, you got to get out of this base. It's not safe anymore. Just really, really fascinating stuff there. But one other callback that I want to point out too, Josh, when you were talking about the stormtroopers, how is it that they get to be so violent, perhaps? I'm sure you guys are familiar with the fan films, Troops.
Yes.
So I thought those were terrific parodies of, the stormtroopers just hanging out on Tatooine and acting like cops and, having to deal with all these insane calls. And, sometimes they would just blast people. I'm not sure that was maybe the legally advisable thing to do, but it was pretty, from a sci-fi perspective, it was entertaining.
It's like the real story is that it's a domestic disturbance with Owen and Beru, and she comes and blows everybody up.
That was amazing.
I still have that on VHS somewhere around here.
Yeah, I think it was during the 90s when we didn't have a lot of Star Wars, but that was pretty
it was
amazing.
phenomenal. The only other point that I wanted to add in relation to this is you're seeing with bits like this mission to Onderon. I don't know whether we'll see more of Saw, but these are the seedlings that lead to him splintering from the rebellion. Well, probably joining the rebellion to begin with, being probably one of the founding members, and then splintering from it. Because when it's a race to the bottom, when you have no checks on your own actions, when you have this mentality that whatever it takes to get the job done is what I'm willing to do, it's a race to the bottom, and you will end up inspiring folks or putting folks like Saw Gerrera into a position where they feel compelled or justified in racing further to the bottom than you, or engage in that race in the first place. And I think because in the Clone Wars, when you see Saw, I think he's hard edged, but I don't think he's the kind of Saw that you see as of Rogue One.
Ooh, yeah.
This is the start of that pathway, and it's because of actions and people like Tarkin that help form and create, the Saw that we see in Rebels when he's accosting Mon Mothma and chastising her about not doing what it takes, and then ultimately splintered off on his own, fruitless campaign of terror in Rogue One. And it just, none of that's conducive to anything that the Empire is trying to achieve, rightly or wrongly, and ultimately it just breeds more destruction and loss of innocent life, unfortunately.
Well, there's as a counter, I would add that the best way to recruit from the rebellion is from the Empire, because if the soldiers who fired on the civilians probably want out. You get Agent Callus, who eventually defects as well.
Yeah,
so,
that was a great character arc.
Exactly.
So I would suspect that as people who join the Imperial war machine because they think like, hey, I'm helping society, and the Clone Wars was horrible, and I'm doing my part, and then they see a bunch of Wookiees get firebombed, they're gonna go like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, this was not what I wanted to do. This is not what we signed up for, and it's all a lie. And like Solo shows that very powerfully as well, because with Han, in the mud, it's like, why are we here? So
we're the hostiles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are ruining their lives, so we should be the ones leaving. So I think those are important factors to consider as well. That, yeah, Saw can drive people into the arms of the Empire, but the Empire, as soon as you start blowing up planets, I mean, granted, that's the extreme. There's no going back after that.
Yeah.
But when you start saying like, oh, civilians were attacked, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe that drone strike that hit a wedding was just a big boo-boo, and like it wasn't intentional. As opposed to, are we targeting civilians? Like, is that what we're doing now? And like that's where people get off the train, and they realize.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
No, I'm done. Go for it.
I was just going to say this moral ambiguity that you're pointing out just makes me more excited for the Cassian Andor series, because the Rogue One era, New Hope era, and Cassian Andor, that's all about that gray area. Okay, we're on the side of right, we're rebelling against the Empire, but how far do we go? And if we use their methods, what's so different now between us and them, you know?
Yep.
There's a lot of fascinating stuff there. You know, Saw is the radical revolutionary, you know, but we can also kind of sympathize with him in some ways too. Makes you think, what else are they lying about, right? As he says.
We've all done terrible things, as he says.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly, as Cassian says, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Saw, I mean, I do suspect there was recreational Beaujolais use at some point because he's pretty fried. You know, you see where he starts and you see why he lands and you see why he's more machine than man at the end, because you have to know what lines you won't cross. And I do agree Andor can get into that. And this will sound maybe a little high level, but as a spy story, you know, growing up with the Bond era, I would really hope that he shaves and looks like presentable. Trying to sneak into an Imperial base unshaven, it's like they're gonna notice.
He's got a shaving profile. He gets bumps when he shaves.
Yeah. And we've seen people wearing tuxedos in casinos, right? And The Last Jedi. So hey, Andor can pull it off, right?
Got to clean up.
Yeah.
It's like that's because if every planet looks like Tatooine, that's gonna get old fast. Like they have to have some diversity of locations. Because if it goes Tatooine to Dagobah, it's like, really? That's all that we have to deal with here? Like, everything's horrible. But yeah, there's so much fertile ground for that, and clearly a creative team that loves the source material. So I'm super excited for it. And they've been. Did either of you see McGregor on Jimmy Fallon this past week?
I didn't watch the interview. No.
It was beautiful. So it was just, he disclosed we did something special on Star Wars Day, but he won't say what. So it's just like,
nice.
Yeah. So there's all the Star Wars TVs being made right now, clearly by people who love Star Wars. And whether it's, you know, this and like we're three lawyers and we just spend an hour talking about war crimes in a children's cartoon. There's a lot to unpack with that statement.
With it, just picture a year from now, we're all, and I include you all listening too, if you have celebration plans, we're going to be getting ramped up and speculating, probably talking about season 2 of The Bad Batch in the middle of our analysis, but then also speculating, hey, when we all see each other in a couple weeks here, what are we going to be seeing debut? What trailers are we getting? That's just phenomenal to me.
During Memorial Day, Star Wars Celebration 2022, hopefully.
Exactly.
Yeah, does that actually hit Memorial Day with the dates? I haven't looked if that's.
Yeah, it leads.
I think so.
So the convention ends the Sunday before Memorial Day.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's good. And it's Anaheim, so for us California boys, that's easy. So
I tried booking my hotel already and can't do it yet. Haven't found one that'll take the reservation yet. So
yeah, they're
smart man.
We got to stay on that though, guys.
That's right.
Dude, I got your tickets while you were in the Grand Canyon. So
you did.
Yeah.
You got mine too, as my internet was failing me. You control all of our fate.
Yeah, there was a disturbance in the force, but Josh quieted it. Okay.
Yep. That was the most active I've ever been in purchasing tickets. With like
that was great.
Go.
That was. You saved our bacon, so that this guy's for you right here, Josh. There you go.
There was so many PayPal transactions flying back and forth. It was
PayPal like flags your account. This is suspicious.
Yeah, right.
Who are these guys? Like, and it's the exact amount for a celebration ticket. Yeah, it was.
Well, I'm glad we haven't refunded those. I'd prefer just to keep the ticket so we've got the guaranteed, badge.
Again, can't wait. Absolutely can't wait. And by then, I'll probably be comfortable not wearing a mask. So, but again, 2022, and
I guess if you're listening to this and didn't hear, they moved the dates of celebration up from August to May of 2022. So about a 4-month difference.
Right.
Plan accordingly.
Potentially to avoid conflicts with D23, and there may
Yeah.
be other reasons as well. But I am hoping, and I think I speak for all of us here. We're in May of 2021. The pandemic has been going for more than a year. I'm hoping that 2022 ends up being what we had hoped 2020 was going to be, with many conventions, WonderCon, San Diego Comic-Con, Star Wars Celebration, all of these great events. And I think we will certainly appreciate them all more so now than ever before.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I just miss getting a beer with you guys. I'll just come out in there and say that. So,
Definitely.
and many of those of you listening to us or watching us now, you've been right there at our panels and whatnot. So we're eager to get back in the fray.
Definitely. Again, I'd just like to barbecue. Like come over, we could watch TV together. Like that
Yeah.
would be delightful.
We miss hanging out with our people, right? Our tribe.
That's right.
Exactly. But this could be a really nice click, because we go from WonderCon, which is generally around March, maybe April, but March-ish. And then May, so 2 months later, we would get Celebration. And then mid-July, we'd get Comic-Con. That, for the California attendees, that's a nice pace.
That's a good clip.
Yeah, because
that's a lot.
It's
and don't forget, Josh, don't forget Comic Fest.
Oh, I never do. But that's
February or so,
Yeah, it's sometimes January, but they've run January to March has been their window.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful show to learn how.
Yeah.
Because it's family friendly and low impact. And like that's a nice trainer. Or if you just want to go and not be in a giant crowd and just they have A-list talent and none of the crowds. So it's like wow, I can go talk to William Stout. That's phenomenal. It's like, oh wow, Floyd Norman. That's incredible. It's just all these legends walking around and they're approachable. And like you can't do that at San Diego because Comic-Con, because it's coming from a fire hose. That said, this could be a really nice pace for 2022. So there's a little downtime in between, something to look forward to. For those of us who put together the panel slides, that's also a nice, since we do have day jobs that we have as well. So again, it's a nice, steady thing to look forward to. And also figure out the trial schedule, because we're getting trial dates in 2022 as well. So time to book all the shows on the work calendar so we can keep an eye out.
So we can go to the shows, yeah.
But it'll be fun to be with the community again. And but there's a lot to talk about before we get there. So with that, this is episode 3. And so we have, when they said 16 episodes, I don't know if the first one counts as 3. So I don't know how they're counting.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I hope not.
I'm grateful.
That's me being selfish.
Yeah. The more the better here. Come on.
Yeah, again, we have issues with Wrecker having a headache on the side of his head where the chip is. Yes. So we get that. We have Tech building a scanning device that I don't know if that's supposed to deactivate chips or what the intent will be. But probably they'll need to cure Gregor in probably less than ideal conditions. And then they'll figure out how to, help Crosshair. Because what I'm wondering, like, again, I hate Star Wars speculation because people are frequently wrong, and it's also the first path to disappointment, and that leads to the dark side.
Very true.
But the opportunities that they have, it would be, if they're able to save Crosshair, could they like launch an EMP type device that liberates the other clones? And so do you get the beginning of the rebellion with the former clone army that just goes
Be
like,
cool to watch.
That'd be
That would
fast.
be-
I would love to watch that. Yeah.
because I don't know if that would look like Bora Rebellion or what, but like that could be fascinating. Or they go their separate ways. It's like, oh wow, we're free now. You know, I want to go be a painter, and
Yeah.
or whatever. That could be really. Or are they the first generation of the rebellion? So, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
in the first generation, because I saw the first generation. But so anyway, those are just storytelling opportunities they have, and we'll see where they go with it.
I'll sub. This isn't going to happen in the season, and if it does, I'd be ecstatic. But I would love to see Delta Squad get brought in. The old clone from the Clone Commando game. They are
Oh,
canon. You did see them in an episode just briefly of the Clone Wars, escorting the body of a Jedi back to the.
Yes.
But in
wow.
any event, seeing them get brought in and link up with Crosshair in the Elite Squad would be excellent and bone chilling at the same time. But
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna get lucky enough for that. So we'll see.
No, but I think we'll see Rex.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
I'd love to see Rex.
Oh yeah,
That would be awesome. And
we've already
I
heard him.
cheered. Yeah, I cheered when they said his name. Oh, you just missed him. He was here yesterday. Oh my God. That was awesome. Wow. Love Rex,
Yeah, again, there are figures of him back there. So
Yep.
it's
Yep.
a wonderful character. So again,
I predict that after all this, Hunter is a changed person. He opens up an intergalactic childcare center, and starts his own brand of caring for young kids. He loves it. He goes the full 3 men and a baby route, and he ends up domiciled, domesticated. So
Or-
Great care for your children is in range.
yes,
or he does the Baden Powell and starts scouting. And
no, yeah,
this is the other thing. There's mild child endangerment with Omega.
yeah,
But I'm really liking the way they're handling her, because she's not Wesley Crusher. So
Yeah.
like she's
Yeah.
not developing, like bizarre technology to save the day. I mean, she climbed into a hole, something a kid could do, and then deductive reasoning, I'll throw the flashlight and get our capacitor and get out of here. And it's like that works. That seems like the thing a kid would do.
no, she's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah,
I love her so far.
yeah, and we don't know what her special ability is yet.
No,
No, again, speculation's horrible. I think she's a clone of a Jedi, and I wouldn't put it past them to have a Jedi from the old Republic, as in the High Republic era, or if they, she's like from Kenobi's DNA somehow. I wouldn't be surprised if either
Wow.
of those come in. But again, that's just wild speculation, because she. I think they did something than Django's DNA.
Yeah. I don't think we've yet had a clone Jedi. I was going to mention that earlier when we were discussing clones. The Force goes through all living beings, but maybe she's the first.
yeah, could link
Thomas,
up with Mandalorian and
Yeah,
what they're doing
Thomas,
there.
You may know better than me if in the secondary materials we've had any clone Jedi, but I'm not aware of anyone.
not
as
in
of yet.
canon. No,
Yeah.
we don't have a Luke like we had in Legends.
That
Not yet, at least.
it wasn't like Heir to the Empire had like an old Jedi clone that
Yeah.
Thrawn confronted.
Yeah, Sabaoth, I think that's how you pronounce it. And then you had the clone of Luke, of course, from his hand that Luke had to fight, and then Mara Jade. I don't
Yeah.
think these are spoilers. These are like 30 years later, but and Mara Jade takes down, Great
Yeah.
trilogy. Oh my God. Love that, love that book trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't read it. I had friends who did, so that's all the knowledge that I have is cocktail talk.
That makes the most sense because Lama Su says that they're trying to create this superior clone. Well, you're not going to convince the Empire that you have just a stronger or better shooting clone. Like Omega is clearly not. Well, maybe she's a great shot, but she's not some super soldier like Captain America style. So it's something else, and I think it's probably Force use that would tie nicely into the Mandalorian and the little bits that we've seen there. But they don't do anything without a purpose, and I love that line, that little dangler.
Josh with the. Sorry, go ahead, Thomas.
No, I was just going to say it was a nice little sort of foreboding line. It's going to play into something bigger.
Josh, that's a bold prediction. I think there's a decent chance you may be correct. And if so, you will get to crow when we learn of it.
I'm used to being wrong, so, I'm not. But I think that would be neat storytelling if they went there.
Yeah.
I have no knowledge, but I think that would be neat storytelling. So, because I think just, they played with Jango Fett's DNA and they came up with a little girl that has a Kiwi accent. It's like, okay, that was
throwing me off as well. Yeah.
I want to believe it's, somebody from the cover of a High Republic book that I haven't read. And, or, this way you can get, this is how Rey is the granddaughter of Kenobi. Is from a clone but that's just wild speculation. So.
You guys don't watch DuckTales, do you?
No,
I did the first couple episodes, but no.
Okay, because we love DuckTales and Disney Plus, but that we just watched the 3-part series finale. Unfortunately, they've ended the series.
Oh, man.
But there is a clone story in there, so I won't say any more other than that.
Nice.
I've seen some of the episodes. They're hysterical.
Well, they're so good. So good.
I've heard nothing but good stuff about it.
When the girls are a little older, Thomas, they might be into it.
Yeah.
Definitely. So with that, everyone, thank you for tuning in. We will be back with more. Until then, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay geeky. And may the Force be with you.